I'm Lucy, I'm 29, I'm a woman, and on Christmas morning, I finally understood my role in my family. I was not their daughter or their sister, but their ATM, and my only value was the cash I could dispense. The moment of clarity came when my sister unwrapped a brand new MacBook, my brother got the latest iPhone, and my mother handed me a clumsily rewrapped mug from the previous year, smiling as she said the words that had defined my life. You never make a fuss. For as long as I can remember, my family has operated on a system of unspoken rules, a hierarchy of needs where mine were always at the bottom. It wasn't a loud, aggressive kind of neglect. It was a quiet, insidious dismissal, a constant reinforcement that my siblings' wants were necessities, while my actual needs were inconveniences. My mother, Karen, was the gentle architect of this system. She never raised her voice, she didn't have to. A soft, disappointed sigh, or a well-placed, guilt-inducing comment, was all it took to keep me in line. My brother Mark is the eldest at 32. He's the golden boy, the one who could do no wrong even when everything he did was wrong. He floated from one brilliant business idea to the next, each one requiring a substantial investment from our parents, and later from me. My sister, Jessica, 4 years my junior, is the baby. She's the delicate, pretty one who needed to be shielded from the world's harsh realities, a narrative she happily embraced. Her life was a curated feed of brunches, boutique shopping trips, and vacations, all funded by a vague part-time job as a social media assistant, and a hefty, unspoken allowance from the Bank of Lucy. And then there was me, the reliable one, the sensible one, the one who got a scholarship to a state university for a difficult engineering program because my parents couldn't afford to help, only to watch them co-sign a loan for Mark's brand new sports car 2 months later because he needed to project success. I didn't complain. I worked 3 part-time jobs, ate ramen noodles more nights than I could count, and graduated with honors. My graduation party was a sheet cake from the grocery store served on paper plates in the backyard. My mom said money was tight. A week later, she had a new sunroom added to the house to give Jessica a nice place to read. I just nodded. I never made a fuss. One of the most glaring examples of this dynamic happened about 5 years ago. I had just landed my first major promotion. After years of being the junior member of my software engineering team, I was finally promoted to a lead position with a significant salary increase. I was ecstatic. I had called my mom, my voice buzzing with excitement, to share the news. "Oh, that's nice, dear," she'd said, her tone distracted. "Listen, while I have you, Mark's in a bit of a jam. His landlord is being unreasonable about the rent, and he's a few hundred short. You know how much pressure he's under trying to get his new venture off the ground." The air went out of my sails. My biggest professional achievement had been reduced to an awkward segue for my brother's latest financial crisis. I asked what the new venture was. "Oh, it's something with artisanal, hand-poured candles. Very trendy," she'd replied vaguely. I knew what that meant. It meant Mark had spent his rent money on supplies for a hobby he'd abandoned in 3 weeks. But I heard the unspoken command in my mother's voice. I was the one with the good job now. I was the one who could fix it. "Of course, Mom, tell him not to worry," I said, the words tasting like ash. I sent Mark the money along with a little extra. He sent back a one-word text, THX. My promotion was never mentioned again. A month later at a family dinner, Mark talked for 2 hours about his burgeoning candle empire, and my mother and sister hung on his every word, their eyes shining with pride. I sat silently, pushing mashed potatoes around my plate. No one asked how my new role was going. The favoritism toward Jessica was less about financial bailouts and more about celebrating her very existence. When she decided she wanted to be a painter, my parents converted the spare bedroom into an art studio for her, complete with expensive easels and canvases. She used it for a month before declaring that the light wasn't right and abandoned it. When I had won a national coding competition in college, a victory that came with a $5,000 prize, my mother's only comment was, "Well, I hope you're not spending too much time on those computer games. It's not very ladylike." But the person who benefited most from my role as the family ATM was my Aunt Susan, my mother's sister. After her husband left her a decade ago, She had declared herself unable to work due to a rotating list of vague, undiagnosed ailments. She moved into a small apartment, and for a few years, my parents helped her. But once my salary crossed a certain threshold, that responsibility Liddy was quietly transferred to me. It started with a suggestion from my mom. You know, Lucy, you're doing so well. It would be such a weight off our minds if you could just help Susan with her rent for a little while, just until she gets back on her feet. A little while turned into 6 years. Every month, a significant portion of my paycheck went directly to Aunt Susan's landlord. I never received so much as a thank you card. If I saw her at family functions, she would complain about the cost of groceries or how her neighbors were too loud, always concluding with a pointed look in my direction and a sigh. It's just so hard to get by. The implication was clear. I should be giving her more. My mother would just pat her sister's hand and say, "Don't worry, Susie. Lucy will take care of it. She's a good girl." I was a good girl. I took care of everyone. I paid for the family vacations we took to give Jessica a break. I covered the emergency room bill when Mark broke his wrist trying to skateboard at 31. I bought the expensive groceries for every holiday meal, which I also cooked, because my mother's hands acted up whenever a major event was on the horizon, and I did it all without a word of complaint. I didn't make a fuss because I had internalized the family narrative. My purpose was to provide. My role was to be the stable, sturdy, and silent pillar that held everyone else up. I had clung to the desperate hope that one day, they would see me. That one day, my quiet sacrifices would be acknowledged, and my love would be returned in a way that wasn't transactional. This Christmas, I thought, would be the year. The weeks leading up to Christmas were filled with a familiar, foolish optimism. This year, I told myself, would be different. This year, they would see. My career had taken another leap forward. I was now a senior engineer at a top tech firm, managing my own team. The compensation was substantial, and for the first time, I wasn't just comfortable, I was genuinely wealthy. And with that wealth came an amplified sense of responsibility, a pressure I placed on myself to make this Christmas truly spectacular for my family. My thinking, flawed as it was that if I could just give a gift so perfect, so generous, it would be impossible for them to ignore the love and thought behind it. Maybe then they would finally see me, Lucy, their daughter and sister, not just their benefactor. It was a desperate, childish wish, the kind you make when you blow out birthday candles, but it was all I had. The planning began in early November. I started with my mom. She had been dropping hints for months about her old, cracked tablet. "I can barely read my recipes on this thing anymore," she'd sigh, squinting theatrically. And Jessica tried to show me a video of her friend's new baby, but the screen is just too small. So, I bought her the latest, top-of-the-line iPad, the one with the largest screen and a beautiful leather case I had custom embossed with her initials. I imagined her face lighting up, her genuine surprise and delight. I pictured her using it in the kitchen, a smile on her face. Next was Mark. He was a creature of trends, always chasing the next status symbol. His current phone was 2 years old, a source of constant, dramatic complaint. "I can't even take decent photos for my business," he'd lamented, referring to his latest failed venture, a dropshipping website for pet accessories. "The camera is ancient." So I pre-ordered the new iPhone, the best model available, in the sleek black color he liked. I also bought a sturdy, expensive case to protect it, knowing his history of carelessness. In my fantasy, he would be speechless, maybe even pull me into a rare, genuine hug. Jessica was the easiest and the hardest. Her entire life was lived through the lens of her laptop. She was an aspiring influencer, though her following was modest, and her old laptop was, according to her, embarrassingly slow. It couldn't handle her video editing, she'd wailed, and it was holding her back from her true potential. The answer was obvious: a new MacBook Pro. It was a ridiculously expensive machine, powerful enough for a professional film editor, but I didn't hesitate. I wanted to give her the tools to succeed, to show her that I believed in her, even if her ambitions seemed flighty to me. Finally, there was Aunt Susan. What do you get for the woman whose entire life you already fund? Giving her a physical gift felt absurd. The best gift I could give her was security, but I was already providing that. I decided that in addition to paying her rent for the upcoming year, I would give her a substantial cash gift, enough to cover all her groceries and utilities for 6 months, with plenty left over for her to buy herself whatever she wanted. It was impersonal, yes, but it was practical, and practicality was the language my family seemed to understand when it came to me. For each of them, I prepared a beautiful, festive envelope. Inside the card for my mom, I wrote, "Mom, I hope this makes keeping up with your recipes and your grandchildren a little easier. I love you so much. Merry Christmas." For Mark, hope this helps you capture all your new successes. Cheering for you always. Love, Lucy. For Jessica, to my creative, brilliant sister, go build your empire. I'm so proud of you. Love, Lucy. And for Aunt Susan, I simply wrote, wishing you a comfortable and happy new year. In each envelope, alongside the card, I placed a crisp stack of $100 bills. 10 for Mark, 10 for Jessica, and 20 for my aunt. It felt vulgar in a way, reducing my affection to cash, but it was a supplement to the extravagant main gifts, a little something extra to make their lives easier. The stack of envelopes felt heavy in my hands, a physical representation of my hope. As I wrapped the MacBook, the iPhone, and the iPad in shimmering, expensive paper, a small, cold voice of doubt whispered in the back of my mind. It reminded me of all the Christmases past. The year I was 16 and had saved up for months to buy my mom a beautiful cashmere scarf, only to watch her thank me politely and then gush over the cheap perfume Mark had bought her at the last minute from a drugstore. Or the year I spent a full month knitting a complex, patterned sweater for my dad before he passed away, a labor of love, while Jessica gave him a world's best dad mug she'd picked up at the airport. He'd used that mug every single day. The sweater remained in his drawer, untouched. I remembered last Christmas. I had given my mother a beautiful first edition copy of her favorite book, which I had tracked down through a rare book dealer. For Jessica, a gift certificate for a weekend spa retreat with her best friend. For Mark, a set of professional-grade tools for his fleeting woodworking phase. They had all accepted them with muted thanks before turning their attention to the main event, exchanging gifts among themselves. My gift from the family had been a generic gift basket of soaps and lotions. It was nice enough, but it was the kind of thing you'd give a coworker you barely knew. Tucked in the back of the basket, I found a small, ceramic mug with a snowman on it. It was cute. I used it a few times and then put it in the back of my cupboard. I pushed the memories away. This year was different because I was different. I was more successful. The gifts were more extravagant. The gesture was bigger. Surely, a gesture this big could not be overlooked. I finished tying the last bow and arranged the presents under my small tree, feeling a fragile sense of anticipation. I packed a separate bag with their main gifts and the cash-filled envelopes, ready for Christmas morning at my mother's house. I was so focused on their reactions, so desperate for a crumb of genuine appreciation, that I never once stopped to consider what they might be giving me. The thought simply didn't enter my mind. Receiving wasn't part of my role. Christmas morning arrived, cold and bright. The drive to my mother's house was filled with a nervous energy that felt like a tight coil in my stomach. I had practiced my smile in the rearview mirror, coached myself to be gracious and joyful, to not let any flicker of disappointment show if their reactions weren't what I had dreamed of. I was pre-managing my own feelings, a lifelong habit. When I walked in, the scene was exactly as I had pictured it. The house was warm and smelled of cinnamon and pine. Christmas music played softly from a speaker in the corner. My mom, Karen, kissed my cheek, her eyes immediately going to the large, elegantly wrapped packages in my arms. "Lucy, you shouldn't have," she said, though her smile indicated she felt I absolutely should have. Mark was already there, lounging on the sofa, scrolling on his old phone with a bored expression. Jessica was flitting around the tree, rearranging ornaments and taking selfies. Aunt Susan was settled in the most comfortable armchair, a cup of tea in her hands, already looking put upon. "Merry Christmas, everyone," I said, my voice brighter than I felt. I placed my gifts under the tree, where they joined a small, sad-looking pile of other presents. The exchange began in a flurry of torn paper and feigned excitement. I watched as my mom opened her gift first. Her eyes widened as she saw the iPad. "Oh my," she breathed. "Karen, that's incredible," Aunt Susan said, leaning over for a better look. "It's the new one, the big one," Jessica squealed, grabbing it from my mom's hands to inspect it. "Mom, you are so lucky. Lucy, that must have cost a fortune." My mother took it back, running her hands over the smooth screen. She looked at me, and for a fleeting second I saw it, a flash of genuine gratitude. "Thank you, Lucy, it's really wonderful." My heart swelled with a cautious joy. This was it. This was the moment. Next was Mark. He ripped his op. N with little ceremony, his bored expression melting away when he saw the iconic white box. "No way," he said, pulling out the new iPhone. "You got me the Pro Max? Lucy, this is insane." He powered it on immediately, his attention completely absorbed by the device in his hands. He didn't say thank you or even look at me again, but he was happy. I counted it as a win. Then Jessica. She opened the large, flat box with a reverence the others hadn't shown. She gasped when she saw the silver MacBook. Actual tears welled in her eyes. "Lucy, I can't believe it," she whispered. "This changes everything for me, everything." She jumped up and threw her arms around my neck in a rare display of affection. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." I felt a dizzying sense of relief. It had worked. The grand gesture had landed. I had bought their happiness, their approval, for the price of a few $1,000s worth of electronics. As they all sat there, marveling at their new toys, a warm glow spread through my chest. I felt seen. I felt appreciated. Then my mother turned to me, a brightly wrapped, lumpy package in her hand. "This one's for you, dear, from all of us." The wrapping paper was cheap, covered in cartoon reindeer, and it was taped haphazardly. It felt light in my hands. I smiled, telling myself that it was the thought that counted. It had to be the thought. I carefully peeled back the paper, the small voice of doubt from the night before now screaming in my head. Inside the box, nestled in a bit of crumpled tissue paper, was a mug. It was a white ceramic mug with a cheerful, slightly chipped snowman painted on the front. I recognized it instantly. It was the exact same mug that had been tucked into the back of my generic gift basket the previous year. My own gift, re-gifted back to me. They hadn't even bothered to find a new one. They had just pulled my own forgotten present out of a cupboard, wrapped it up, and handed it back. I stared at it, my mind going completely blank. The sounds of the room faded into a dull roar. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. I looked up at my mother. She was smiling that same placid, gentle smile she always wore. "We remembered you liked it so much last year," she said, her voice soft and sweet. "And you're so hard to shop for, Lucy. You never want anything, you never make a fuss." "You never make a fuss." The phrase echoed in the sudden, silent space in my head. It wasn't a compliment, it was an expectation. It was the cage they had built for me, the one I had willingly lived in for 29 years. All my life I had been quiet, agreeable, and accommodating, believing that my goodness would eventually be rewarded. And this was my reward. A chipped, second-hand mug. A symbol of just how little thought, effort, or care they had ever invested in me. I wasn't a person to them. I was a resource. A utility that was expected to function perfectly, without requiring any maintenance in return. The warm glow in my chest from moments before turned into a block of ice. I looked from the mug in my hands to the $1,000 laptop, the top-tier phone, the luxury tablet. The disparity wasn't just insulting, it was clarifying. It was the final piece of data I needed to complete a picture I had been refusing to see my entire life. I nodded slowly, a mechanical movement. I couldn't form words. I just looked at the mug, then back at my mother's smiling face. And in that moment, something inside me broke. Or maybe it finally healed. Quietly, I reached into my handbag, the one sitting at my feet. My fingers found the thick, festive envelopes I had so hopefully prepared. One by one, I pulled them out. The one for Mom, the one for Mark, the one for Jessica, the one for Aunt Susan. They were so busy with their new gadgets they didn't even notice. With methodical, deliberate movements, I slipped each cash-filled envelope back into the inner pocket of my purse and zipped it shut. The action was small, silent, but it felt like a tectonic shift. It was the first time in my life I had ever taken something back. I stood up. The movement was so abrupt it finally pierced their tech-induced bubbles. Mark looked up from his phone, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. Jessica paused her exploration of the MacBook's features. My mother's smile faltered slightly. "Are you leaving already, dear?" she asked. "You haven't even had a piece of my coffee cake." "I'm not hungry," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat and empty. I walked to the hall closet and pulled on my coat and boots. The silence in the living room was heavy now, laced with confusion. They were sensing a disruption in the program, a deviation from the script they had all memorized. I slung my handbag over my shoulder. The weight of the returned envelopes felt like armor. As I turned towards the front door, my Aunt Susan's sharp voice cut through the quiet. "Wait a minute," she called out, her tone laced with an acquisitive panic. She had finally noticed the absence of an expected transaction. "Where's our gift?" She used the word our. Not my, but our. As if the cash I provided was a collective entitlement, a group salary they had all earned simply by being related to me. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. I turned back to face them, my family, staring at me with a mixture of confusion and dawning greed. They looked like children who had just been told the candy store was closing. Mark had put his phone down. Jessica's hands were hovering over her new laptop. My mother looked genuinely bewildered, as if this behavior was something she couldn't possibly compute. I looked directly at my aunt, the woman whose rent I had paid for 72 consecutive months. I let a small, tight smile touch my lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just been set free. "You already got it," I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the silent room. "Me paying your rent, all year." I let the words hang in the air for a moment. I saw the flicker of comprehension, then outrage on her face. Before she could form a reply, I turned back to the door, opened it, and stepped out into the biting Christmas Day cold. The crisp air was a shock to my system, a welcome, cleansing sting against my flushed cheeks. I took a deep breath, the frozen air filling my lungs. Behind me, I heard the door fly open. "Lucy, what are you talking about?" It was my mother, her voice no longer gentle but sharp with panic. "Come back inside, you're being ridiculous." What did she mean about the rent? I heard Mark's voice, loud and angry. Then, they were all spilling out onto the front stoop, a chaotic jumble of coats hastily thrown over pajamas. They followed me down the walkway as I headed for my car, their voices rising in a frantic chorus. "Lucy, wait!" my Aunt Susan shrieked, her voice cracking. She was clumsy in her slippers on the icy flagstones. "You can't be serious, it's Christmas. What about my gift? What about a little something?" Just a little something. The phrase, so small and seemingly innocent, ignited a cold fire in my gut. My entire life had been a little something for them. A little bit of my income. A little bit of my time. A little bit of my emotional energy. A little bit of my soul. They had taken, and now they were begging for the crumbs I had finally swept off the table. "My MacBook," Jessica cried, as if I were about to remotely deactivate it. "You're not going to ask for it back, are you?" That was the question that finally made me stop. I was halfway to my car, my keys in my hand. I didn't turn around. I just stood there, my back to them, looking at the pristine white snow covering the quiet suburban street. The thought of asking for the gifts back hadn't even occurred to me. The gifts were a sunk cost, a final, expensive lesson. "No, Jessica," I said, speaking to the empty street in front of me. "The gifts are yours. Consider them a severance package." A stunned silence followed that remark. Then, my mother's voice, trembling with a rage I had never heard from her before. "A severance package? What is wrong with you? We are your family. After everything we've done for you." The sheer, breathtaking audacity of that statement was almost comical. Everything we've done for you. What had they done? They had allowed me the privilege of funding their lives. They had graciously accepted my sacrifices. They had given me a chipped mug. I didn't say any of that. There was no point. An argument implies that there is something to be won, some common ground to be reached. I knew, with absolute certainty, that there was none. We were standing on opposite sides of a canyon that had been carved out over decades of their taking and my giving. They continued to shout as I reached my car, their pleas growing more desperate and pathetic. They begged for just a little Christmas money. Mark yelled that he depended on that cash for his business. Aunt Susan was now openly weeping about her bills. I got into my car and started the engine. Through the windshield I could see them, a huddled, desperate group in the middle of the snowy lawn, looking small and lost. For a second, a pang of the old, familiar guilt resonated in my chest. But then I looked at the passenger seat, where the re-gifted snowman mug sat. I didn't even turn around. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb, leaving them standing in the snow, shouting my name into the cold morning air. As I turned the corner, I glanced in my rearview mirror. They were still there, watching me go. Then they were gone. The silence in my car was absolute, and for the first time in my entire life, it sounded like peace. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember the roads I took or the traffic lights I stopped at. My mind was a strange mix of numb shock and exhilarating clarity. The snowman mug sat. On my passenger seat, a silent, ceramic witness to the implosion of my life as I knew it. When I got back to my apartment, the quiet felt different. It wasn't the lonely quiet I was used to, it was a vast, peaceful quiet, an emptiness full of possibility. I walked in and dropped my keys on the counter. My hand went to my purse, and I pulled out the 4 envelopes. I fanned them out on the kitchen island like a winning hand of cards. The sight of them, thick with the cash I had almost given away, was a potent symbol of my newfound agency. I had taken my power back. The first text message arrived less than 20 minutes after I left. It was from my mother. I have never been so embarrassed in my entire life. Your aunt is hysterical. You need to call me and apologize immediately. Apologize, the word seemed absurd. I stared at the text, feeling nothing. No guilt, no anger, not even annoyance. I simply deleted it. Then came the storm. My phone began to vibrate incessantly, a relentless assault of calls and texts from every member of my family. Marks were angry and demanding. What the hell, Lucy? You know I needed that cash. You trying to ruin my business? Another one followed a minute later. Pick up the phone. Now. Jessica's were a blend of confusion and wounded entitlement. IDK, what's going on, but everyone is freaking out. You really hurt Mom's feelings. And Aunt Susan is a mess. That wasn't very nice, Lucy. Aunt Susan, who I'm sure had to have Mark or Jessica type for her, sent a text that was a masterpiece of passive aggression. I hope you are happy. I don't know how I am going to pay my light bill now. I guess I will just sit in the dark. Merry Christmas to me. I let them all come in, watching the screen of my phone light up again and again. Each message, each missed call, was another brick in the wall I was building between my old life and my new one. I didn't have the energy to fight, and I was finally wise enough to know I didn't need to. Their words couldn't hurt me anymore because I was no longer seeking their approval. The transaction was over. I made myself a cup of tea in a plain, unremarkable mug of my own choosing and sat on my sofa. I silenced my phone and placed it face down on the coffee table. For the rest of the day, I did nothing. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't listen to music. I just sat in the quiet, letting the events of the morning settle. I thought about the thousands of dollars I had spent on them over the years. The rent, the loans, the vacations, the gadgets. It wasn't the money that hurt. It was the realization that I had been paying for a simulation of love, a cheap imitation of a family that was only available to me as long as my account was in good standing. The next day, the tactics shifted. The anger subsided, replaced by manipulative affection. My mother left a long, tearful voicemail. Lucy, honey, it's Mom. I don't know what got into you yesterday. We were all so worried. We love you so much. Please, just call me. We can fix this. Whatever it is, we can fix it. But she didn't know what it was. She didn't mention the mug. She didn't acknowledge the years of disparity. She just wanted to smooth things over, to return to the comfortable status quo where her needs, and the needs of her favored children, were met without question. A few days later, a package arrived. It was from Jessica. Inside was a framed photo of the two of us as children, along with a note written in her loopy, girly handwriting. "Remember how we used to be. I miss my big sister. I don't care about the money, I just want our family back together. I love you." For a moment, that one almost worked. A pang of nostalgia hit me, a longing for a simpler time that probably never existed. I looked at the photo of two little girls in matching dresses. I was the taller one, my arm protectively around a smiling Jessica. Even then, I was the designated caretaker. I realized the note was just another tool of manipulation, more sophisticated than Mark's rage or Susan's guilt trips, but a tool nonetheless. She didn't want me back. She wanted the benefits that came with me. The ultimate test came a week into the new year. My phone rang with an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. It was Aunt Susan's landlord. "Hi, is this Lucy?" he asked, his voice businesslike. "I'm calling about Susan's rent for this month. It's past due. She gave me your number and said you handle her finances." My heart hammered in my chest. This was the real-world consequence. This wasn't just a family argument, it was someone's housing. The old Lucy would have crumbled, apologized profusely, and paid immediately, ashamed of causing a problem. "Hello, are you there?" the landlord asked. I took a deep breath. "Yes, I'm here," I said, my voice firm. "I'm sorry for the confusion, but there's been a change in circumstances. I will no longer be responsible for Susan's rent payments. That arrangement has ended." "Oh," he said, surprised. "I see, so the payment for January." "That is a matter you will need to discuss with your tenant, Susan," I said politely. "I am no longer involved. Thank you for your understanding." I hung up the phone before he could reply. My hand was shaking, but a wave of profound relief washed over me. I had done it. I had severed the final, most tangible tie. It was terrifying, but it was also the most freeing thing I had ever done. That night, I took the money from the 4 envelopes. It was a significant amount of cash. I went online and found 4 different charities, a food bank, an animal shelter, a women's crisis center, and a scholarship fund for underprivileged students. I divided the money equally and made a donation to each, this time in my own name. It was the first time I had ever given a gift where the only thing I expected in return was the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had done something good, for no other reason than because I could. I changed my phone number the next day. The silence that followed was absolute. It was no longer a temporary reprieve, it was my new reality. The storm was over. For 2 months, there was nothing. The silence was a balm. I started reclaiming the parts of my life I had given away. I dove into a challenging new project at work, not because I needed the money, but because I loved the intellectual puzzle of it. I reconnected with old college friends, the ones I had drifted away from because I was always too busy with family obligations. I started taking weekend hiking trips, exploring the mountains outside the city, and found a quiet joy in the simple act of putting one foot in front of the other, moving forward under my own power. I had assumed that by changing my number, I had created an impenetrable fortress. I had underestimated their desperation. It was a Tuesday night. I was home from work, cooking dinner for myself, when the main buzzer for my apartment building rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I pressed the intercom button. "Hello." "Lucy, it's me, it's Mom." My blood ran cold. I froze, my hand hovering over the stove. How had she found me? Then I remembered. I was still listed as the emergency contact on her medical forms. She must have called my office, and a naive receptionist, hearing the panic in a mother's voice, must have given her my address. "Please, Lucy, just let me in," her voice crackled through the speaker. "I'm not here to fight, I just want to talk." My first instinct was to say no, to leave her standing on the street. But I knew it would only delay the inevitable. She would wait. She would cause a scene. This was a confrontation that had to happen, and it was better to have it on my own terms, in my own space. Fine, I said, my voice tight. Come up. I buzzed her in and waited by the door, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. When she knocked, I took a deep breath and opened it. She looked smaller than I remembered, and tired. The placid confidence she always wore was gone, replaced by a raw, anxious energy. Her eyes darted around my apartment, taking in the neat, minimalist space that was so different from her own cluttered home. It's a very nice place, she said quietly. What do you want, Mom? I asked, not inviting her to sit down. Her face crumpled. I want to understand, Lucy. What did we do that was so terrible? We gave you a good life, we love you. There it was again. The complete lack of self-awareness, the genuine belief in her own victimhood. I felt a surge of frustration, but I pushed it down, replacing it with a cold, calm resolve. You didn't give me a good life, I said, my voice even. You gave me a job. My role was to be the family financier and emotional support system, and in return for my service, I was ignored. Do you have any idea how that feels? That's not true, she insisted, her voice rising. We always included you. You included my wallet, I countered. Let me ask you a question. What is my favorite color? She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing silently. She had no idea. What's my best friend's name? I pressed. What was the name of the company I worked for before this one? What did I get my degree in? The silence was her answer. She knew every detail of Mark's failed businesses and Jessica's fleeting hobbies, but she knew nothing about me, the person. You see, I said softly, you don't know me, you know my bank balance. On Christmas morning, you handed me a year-old, re-gifted mug that I had given you, and you told me it was because I never make a fuss. You weren't thanking me for being low maintenance. You were thanking me for being invisible. You were thanking me for asking for nothing, so you could give everything to Mark and Jessica. Tears began to stream down her face. You were always so strong, Lucy, so capable. They needed me more. It was the oldest excuse in the book, the one used to justify the neglect of the chill. D who doesn't cause problems. I didn't think I needed to worry about you. Every child needs their mother, I said, the words heavy with a lifetime of longing. I needed you too. I just learned how to stop showing it, because I knew it wouldn't be seen. We stood there in silence for a long moment. Finally, she seemed to deflate, the fight going out of her. Your aunt lost her apartment, she said, her voice a near whisper. She's sleeping on my couch. Mark had to sell his car, he's looking for a real job now. Jessica, she's working full-time at a coffee shop. She returned the MacBook. I hadn't expected that. A flicker of surprise went through me. I waited for the guilt, the pang of responsibility. It never came. All I felt was a distant, clinical sadness. Sadness for the fact that it took a complete financial catastrophe for them to learn the lessons of basic adult responsibility. That sounds difficult for all of you, I said, my tone neutral. My mother looked up, her eyes pleading. We need your help, Lucy. We can't do this without you. Just a little bit to get us back on our feet. We've learned our lesson. I promise it will be different this time. And there it was, the real reason for her visit. The apology tour was just the opening act for the main event, another request for money. The hope that I would step back into my old role, that the past 2 months had been a temporary tantrum, and I was now ready to resume my duties. I shook my head slowly. No, Mom. No, she repeated, bewildered. No, I said again, more firmly this time. That life is over, the bank is closed. What you do now is up to you. You will figure it out because you have to, just like I did. I walked over and opened the front door. It was a clear, final dismissal. She stared at me, her expression a mixture of disbelief and deep, profound hurt. She saw that I meant it. The finality of my decision was written on my face. She walked past me without another word, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I closed the door behind her and leaned against it, my legs weak with the adrenaline of the confrontation. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I just felt quiet. It was the quiet of a long, painful chapter finally coming to a close. I had faced the final boss, and I had won not by fighting, but by refusing to play the game ever again. It has been a year since that Christmas. A year of quiet, deliberate, and sometimes difficult healing. The first few months after my mother's visit were the hardest. The phantom limb of familial obligation would sometimes ache. I would see a commercial for a new phone, and my first thought would be, Mark would love that. I'd walk past a store with a beautiful dress in the window and think, that's Jessica's style. The habits of a lifetime are hard to break. But instead of acting on those impulses, I learned to acknowledge them and then let them go, like releasing a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. I never heard from them directly again. I learned through the grapevine of distant relatives that things had, in fact, changed. Aunt Susan, faced with true necessity for the first time in a decade, got a job as a cashier at a local grocery store. Mark, after several humbling months, was hired as a customer service representative for a cable company. It wasn't his dream of being a business tycoon, but for the first time in his adult life, he was earning a steady paycheck. And Jessica, it turned out, was a surprisingly good barista. She discovered she liked the structure of a real job and the satisfaction of earning her own money. She started a new, more authentic social media account documenting her latte art, and it was gaining a small but loyal following. They were surviving. They were learning to stand on their own 2 feet. It turned out, my presence wasn't necessary for their survival, it was only necessary for their comfort. My absence had forced them to grow. As for me, my life blossomed in the space they used to occupy. I was promoted again at work. I bought my own apartment, a bright, airy condo with huge windows overlooking the city. I filled it with things I loved, books, plants, and art from local artists. I adopted a rescue dog, a scruffy terrier mix named Buster, who now greets me at the door with more enthusiasm than my family ever did. My relationship with money changed, too. It was no longer a tool for earning affection or a weight of obligation. It was a resource for building a life I was proud of. I traveled. I saw the ruins in Rome and the beaches in Thailand. I invested in my retirement. And I continued to give to charity, finding a deep sense of purpose in supporting causes I believed in. Last Christmas was quiet. I spent the morning hiking with Buster, the snow crunching under our feet. In the afternoon, I went to a Christmas dinner at my best friend's house, surrounded by her warm, chaotic, and loving family. They asked me questions about my life, my work, my travels. They listened to my answers. They laughed at my jokes. They made me feel seen, valued, and loved for who I was, not for what I could provide. When we exchanged gifts, my friend gave me a beautiful, hand-bound leather journal and a pen. For all your new adventures, she said, hugging me tightly. It was a perfect gift. It was a gift that said, I see you. As I drove home that night, Buster asleep on the passenger seat, I felt a profound sense of peace. There was no anger left towards my family, only a distant pity. They were trapped in a system of their own making, unable to express or receive love without a price tag attached. Perhaps one day they will truly change, but I know now that their healing is not my responsibility. My responsibility is to myself, to protect my peace, to honor my worth, and to build a life filled with genuine connection. Walking away from my family was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, but it was also the greatest gift I have ever given myself. The re-gifted mug, which I kept, now sits on a shelf in my office. It's not a symbol of their disrespect anymore. It's a reminder. It's a reminder of the price of silence, the cost of being the one who never makes a fuss. And it's a reminder that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is to walk out into the snow and not turn around. So, for anyone out there who feels invisible, who feels like their love and support are taken for granted, I see you. You are not just a resource. Your worth is not defined by your utility to others. You are allowed to make a fuss. You are allowed to take back your envelopes. You are allowed to choose your own peace.